It's called M.A.P.S. M.A.P.S. Mindset, audience, product, and scale. Build an audience, give value that's going to be really valuable later on. And then the third part is product. And so once you have an audience, figure out what the problems they have, how you can help them. And it really comes from a place of like serving them. Once you have that, kind of nail down that product market with the product, then you can move on to the next phase, which is scaling. And this is where all the operational stuff comes into play. You can't have scaling without product. You can't have product without audience. You can't have audience without really knowing what you're getting yourself into with the mindset.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. Today's guest, Yong Soo Chung, left a successful career in cryptocurrency software engineering to found his first 8-figure e-commerce business, Urban EDC. He then went on to launch GrowthJet, a climate-neutral certified third-party logistics company. We'll get into that. Yong Soo is passionate about sharing the lessons he's learned with other entrepreneurs so they too can start a company that is both profitable and sustainable. And he hosts a really cool podcast, First Class Founders, a weekly podcast about building a sustainable, bootstrapped 8-figure business. Yong Soo, man, welcome.
Jamie, thanks so much for having me, man.
Of course. I'm going to start maybe a little untraditionally for you. And I don't want to know the backstory. We're going to get to that. This is going to be like open loop shit, right? We're going to like give this little teaser and then we'll go back and figure out how it happened. But I had the opportunity in your hometown in San Fran to interview Exhibit on stage. You know Exhibit, the rapper.
Yes.
Right. But you have taken it to another level. You lived with Coolio. So what I want to hear, you live with the late, great Coolio. What I want to hear is one or two, whatever it is, stories, incidents. I just love to hear something interesting about living with Coolio. Then we'll figure out why you did later.
Yeah. So we were in South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. And I was part of this company and we were hosting a party and Coolio happened to be our headliner for that party. And he just kind of showed up. And to be honest, we weren't expecting him to stay with us, but I guess he did. So he ended up, after the party or after the show, he came over. And I mean, obviously he's Coolio, so a lot of people were trying to get into the house and all that. And so we had like a pretty full house. And then all of a sudden he's like, I want to start cooking. And so I guess he had this like Cooking with Coolio show that he just started or something. And so he started cooking pasta for us. And it was wild because we were literally, and the vibe was not like a party vibe. It was just more like, hey, this guy is just cooking dinner for us. So he literally cooked pasta for us. And then the next morning, I was sleeping on an air mattress in the living room, and he was out in the living room, and he was playing his own tracks on iTunes on his computer, and he was literally just like rapping it like word for word on it. So it was crazy because he was playing his own track on his computer and just literally just rapping to it. And that one was just wild because I don't know, it's just kind of like I've never seen an actual like artist or whatever like just playing their own stuff and just literally just word for word. It sounded exactly like the track and it was just like crazy. So
that's cool, man.
Yeah.
That's cool. It's so sad that he passed. I mean, he was a legend. Did he ever walk up to you and say something like, "Look at the situation you got me facing"? It's a lyric from Gangsta's Paradise. Anybody that knows the rest of that, you can do the next lyric in the YouTube comments. But I loved Coolio, man. Growing up, he was I think I got a few years on you, so he was a big deal, man. He was amazing. When I heard that story, I'm like, oh, I got it. We got to start there. You got to always start with Coolio whenever possible.
He had a lot of backstories too about the music industry, and he was talking about Redman, Method Man, Busta Rhymes. It was a lot of stories that, to be honest, like they were kind of behind the scenes stories, and like there's a lot of shady stuff around that time for the music industry, and so he was like diving into that, and he was really animated. So
that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's dive into more about you. And I want to kind of like roll through a little bit of your history here and get to maybe some more meat here. Cause I'm really, really interested in Urban EDC and how that came to be and everything. But tell me if I'm off on any of this. 08, 09, you're in finance, slightly off Wall Street, bad time to be there, obviously. And you start doing this side hustle, personal finance blog, even an iPhone app that I think failed. So you're going down this place and eventually you move to San Fran. One way, move out there. You wanted to do a startup. Fast forward to around 2015, I believe you launched your first business, an e-commerce company called Urban EDC, which I think is that everyday carry, urban
yes,
everyday
it
carry.
is.
Because you're selling you're a software guy. You worked for Ripple. You worked in crypto, like all this stuff, and now you're selling pocket knives. Can you please explain how the hell that happens?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to be honest, when I look back on it now, it's a pretty crazy jump because I was living in San Francisco in the hub of all this crazy tech, innovation happening, and I was working as a software engineer for Ripple, and I got in really early, so I actually joined them in March 2014. And yeah, that was a fantastic experience. I mean, the people that were there were way smarter than me, and it was just a crazy time to be part of that. Um, but then towards the end of 2015, there was a lot of regulations that started coming down, and so like obviously we still have regulation issues, but um, FinCEN was one of the issues that we were resolving, and that's been resolved. But right around that time, like we literally had our team had a lot of momentum going for us, and we actually moved real value. Like we were trading between US dollars and Mexican pesos back and forth cross borders. And like our team was the first team to do that. And we were like really proud of that. So we
Mhm.
had all this momentum going. And then all of a sudden, like this regulation started happening. And we were told to stop doing everything. Like we were just blocked. And I don't know, for me, it really felt like I'm someone that needs to keep moving forward. Like I need to see progress. Like it like bothers me when I don't see progress. And so at that point, I kind of decided, hey, this is probably a good point to jump ship because, I feel like I really gave everything I got to this company. So I was there for a year and a half and, we were really rolling. We're really rolling. And then all of a sudden it's like we hit a brick wall or something. Right.
Stop. Yeah.
And so at that point, um, I'm going to evaluate myself. So what am I spending my time doing? Obviously, I was in crypto, but I wanted to do something that wasn't going to require me to build out a team to raise VC money. And the reason is because I think, to be honest with you, now that I look at it, it was a little bit of a backlash of like, I felt like the government was, coming after us a little bit, our team. And I felt like um, I didn't have control over a lot of stuff around that time in my life. And so I decided, hey, you know what? I'm just going to double down and bet on myself. And so I wanted to do something that wasn't going to require a large team or wasn't going to require some like crazy like VC money or anything like that. And so this e-commerce shop, it was just starting to the trend was going from Amazon FBA to building your own brand using Shopify. And so I just skipped the entire Amazon FBA part and went directly to building your own brand on Shopify. And so yeah, that transition happened. I launched the shop in October 2015, and yeah, it was a really crazy jump. Going back to your question, it was something that I honestly really didn't think about that much, the ramifications. But I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I felt like it was the right time. And it gave me a lot of freedom and autonomy to do whatever I wanted. And I think that's kind of what I was chasing because it felt like at work it was just so like you can't do this now, you can't do this now, you can't do this, and I just that kind of built up on within me, and I wanted to do something where I had full control over everything that I was doing. So
Makes sense. What was it about like so you're selling, and I want to get to the FBA part. There's a couple questions in there. The fulfillment by Amazon, or skipping that. But what was it about pocket? Like, how did you get into the pocket knife space specifically? Like, how did you get there?
yeah, so I launched the shop. Actually, what I did was I bought stuff off of Amazon to test demand for certain types of products.
Oh
And so
wow.
I wasn't making any money. I was buying them, just at retail and then selling them at retail. But I just wanted to see if there was some kind of demand for serving this community of everyday carry enthusiasts. And so, I launched with, I don't know, like 8 products, very small collection. And when I did that, people were like, hey, you don't have pocket knives in your shop. And so I wasn't a big knife guy when I first launched this, but I had an interest in like small pocketable goods, like, like, I don't know, like fidgets and like coins and things like that. And pens, like well machined titanium pens. So that's kind of so when I started hearing that feedback, I was like, okay, well, I better start looking into this because like a lot of people are like, hey, you can't be an everyday carry shop without knives. And so I started looking into it, and I realized that yes, like the knife is kind of the core pillar to everyday carry. So it's like everything else is around the pocket knife. And so I decided to get into that, and then what I realized is like the knife industry is really passionate, and it's a huge like industry. And so I started appreciating knives for the design aspects. Like it's a huge like you can nerd out about blade steels, different locking mechanisms, all that stuff. And when I realized that it was a really like wow, I was like, wow, this is so interesting. It's almost like piece of artwork. It's not about actual usage. Like if you can buy like $1,000 knives and people won't even use it. It's just kind of like almost like a toy that they just like open and close and then like admire it and like it's like
Collectible.
a piece of artwork. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a collectible. So I just got into that, and from then on, I mean, it was just yeah. I mean, it's 90% of our sales, and it's yeah. So
Okay. So this is where I want to get into the FBA stuff. But my understanding, I'm not in this space. I know a few guys in the space.
yeah.
So pardon me for my basic questions here that are going to come going to come out. What I understand of FBA is fulfilled by Amazon, in the simplest terms for me is that is where they would warehouse all goods, and you just you process the order, they handle the shipping. Skipping FBA means that you're going to warehouse all goods. Correct? Am I in the ballpark on that or no?
You're on the right track. So you can use a service called a third party logistics provider, a 3PL, which is ironically, I started a 3PL, a few years down the line, but basically I partnered up with a 3PL that was supposedly the best one because I did a lot of research, went down a lot of rabbit holes, and this service that I decided on was the best one at the time. And so I guess in a way, going back to Amazon FBA, yes, Amazon FBA, you ship out your goods, you prepare them, and then you ship them out to all different sorts of Amazon warehouses across the country, and that's kind of how it works there. But then, if you want to start a brand on Shopify, for example, you got to work with a 3PL who will ship out items on your behalf, or you can ship it out yourself. So get a warehouse, you know, do all that yourself. So those are the kind of the two options if you want to build a brand yourself.
Got it. Got it. Pocket knives. These are not then like run of the mill, mass produced. These are specific niche, handmade. I mean, that's the space you're playing in, right? So, how do you scale that? I guess. I mean, you've been in this business for a few years. Like, is it a reliable monthly, month over month revenue source? Like, is there that much volume of demand for high end pocket pocket knives? I just don't know the space. Like you said, it's 90% of
Yeah.
your business. I think you're doing about 300K a month top line. So is that all? I mean, pocket knives are in that high a demand? Do you see any letting up on that or increasing? Like what is that industry?
Yeah. So it's really interesting because there's certain pockets of like, for example, like you can go to a knife convention, like a knife show that's catered to it's called like art knives basically. And those are like $20,000. And literally they're like made out of really intricate materials, and it's like crazy stuff. And so when you get into the art world, I mean, that's you're talking about like there's not a big market for that, but it's like one sale is like 20,000 or whatever, right? So um there's that market, and then there's like the custom market, which is um right, just knife makers in their garages buys machinery and they make knives, and these go for probably 1 to 2,000 depending on the materials that are used. And so these are usually one-offs. Sometimes they'll make them in small batches, like 3 to 5 knives. um, and so that's the next tier, and then the tier below that is what's called a mid-tech. And a mid-tech is you get your blades and the kind of the shapes of the handles machined elsewhere, but then the knife maker will get all those stuff, and then like they'll kind of like customize it or whatever. But they're outsourcing kind of like that main part of it, and so they'll make sure that everything is good. So they'll QC everything, but they still put a lot of time and effort into that. And that's kind of the mid tier. So that ranges about, I'd say, like 400 to, let's say, $600, that range. And then you get to the production stuff, which obviously there's a huge range in the production knives. So It can be like, a $20 knife that's like really, mass produced and really cheap, versus a production knife can go up to like $400 even. And those are really well made. And to be honest, those higher end production knives are better quality than a lot of the custom ones that go for higher.
Mm.
And so it's an interesting, once you get into higher production knife arena, then like you're actually, it's almost like you have to question whether or not a custom knife is worth it, because it's better quality than the custom knife in a lot of ways. Not
Yeah.
always, but often it is better quality, and you're paying for less. And so that market is also, I'd say that premium production market is probably in the 200 to 400 range.
Mm.
And so going back to your question, I'd say that it really depends on the market. So right now, the production market that I'm telling you about, 200 to 400, that is being a little bit saturated. And so I think there's going to be more and more companies targeting a little bit lower end of that. And so we're seeing a lot more movement into kind of the cheaper stuff. And so we just have to adapt with the times. And we can't be stubborn about, hey, we're going to stick with the custom market, which is $1,000. Like if, we put up a few knives for 1,000, if they're not selling, then of course we have to pivot and we have to adjust for the market. And so our goal is to serve the everyday carry community, and whatever the market decides to do, we'll listen to that very carefully and just kind of adjust.
Now, when you
So
started this business, you're coming out of a, like you said, a company that was going, 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 then boom, full stop because of some regulation. H- how did you initially seed the capital? Did you have it? I don't know. Maybe it was money you had in pocket, ready to go. But talk about the startup, because there's a lot of people that are interested in. Yeah, I'd love to start a business, but even in this e-commerce space. But like, how do I get capitalized for that? Do I need to partner? Do I have to have my own money? Can you just give us a little bit of insight into how you got
yeah,
off the ground?
it's my belief that you don't need a lot of capital to get started. There's a lot of creative ways you can test demand for a product, and then eventually, if you're doing e-commerce, like for example, you can do a Kickstarter or you can do a pre-sale. You can test demand before you commit a lot of capital. And so I always tell entrepreneurs, like, hey, if you are if you're not trying to cure cancer or build a rocket ship, like you really don't need venture backing, because it's really gonna mess with you in terms of like they're gonna have their own expectations, and you're gonna essentially work like crazy, right, to meet these like obligations. And so, um, so obviously you should have like a little bit of a runway before you get started. So I'd say like maybe 6 months to a year is a pretty good start. And then once you have that, then you can do a lot of like get involved in these communities that you're looking to serve, and then figure out what their issues are, and figure out a way that you can kind of plug yourself in and be a better version of whatever's out there. And honestly, that's really simple. I mean, it sounds simple and it's really hard to do, but um, it's just about just going into that community and figuring out, hey, like, can I insert myself in here somehow that's going to make the experience a little better for this community to solve whatever issue they have? And if the answer is yes, then like start small. So you could definitely, buy small amount of inventory or do a pre-sale, or, like I told you, like I bought stuff off of Amazon and resold them at no profit just to test
Mhm.
demand. And so you can do stuff like that, but I definitely don't think you need to like go crazy with inventory buying when you first get going. I mean, a lot of our projects now are on a pre-sale basis, and I'm really glad that we do that, because we've been surprised. Like sometimes we'll oversell, or sometimes it's like a dud, and so we don't sell that many. And so we know, because we did that pre-sale, that we don't have to order like a crazy amount and then we're sitting on inventory. So I definitely think that there's a good way to I guess start without having to think about, hey, I need like, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000, $50,000 as the initial capital. So I really don't think that that's necessary to get started.
Okay. Now you're 8 years in, right? 2015. You're coming up on 8 years, if not at 8 years
Yeah.
already from when you started this business, and you're doing. I think we talked about $300,000 in revenue monthly, if I'm not mistaken. And you've gotten it down for you to be at 1 hour a day. I mean, that's pretty much a. Gobundance, we talk about horizontal income or passive income, right? That's pretty much a horizontal endeavor for you at this point.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, I don't know, the two, three, four key decisions that you've made, or systems, or what you've implemented in order to continue to make your business thrive while you're not involved in it? What are some of the things that you did to get there?
Yeah, so there's a lot of trust involved in this. And so I have a team, a fantastic team. I have a manager who oversees everything for the brand. And that manager came in as a customer service rep, essentially. And so he's been with us for 5 years now. And so he's kind of worked himself up um, to this position. And so he and I are, we have a weekly sync and we have a team sync as well. So right after my one-on-one with him, we have a team sync which he leads. And so I'm just on pretty much on mute, and I let him, you know, run with it. And so it's really about empowering my manager. So I'm empowering him to make sure that he has all the tools in order to lead this team. And so that's why I do the one-on-ones before the team sync, in case, like, I don't want to bring up anything because I want him to bring it up, because that allows the other people on our team to really trust, his direction, right? So I'd say one other thing is, like, yes, you can delegate tasks, but really it's all about delegating decision making. And that is a really hard step, I would say, because their decisions could cost you money down the line, right? Um, but sometimes it might be worth it, because then they learn the lessons, and it's happened. Like, you can't control those mistakes; like, they'll happen. And so you kind of have to almost let them make mistakes so that they can learn from them. And so if you're the one constantly telling your team, like, hey, do X, Y, and Z, then, like, you're going to be the bottleneck. And so you have to kind of, like, let that control go, and let your team trust that your team will make the decisions that's best for the company at that moment in time. And then if things don't work out, then we learn from them, and then we move on. But if you're trying to control every single aspect of what you're doing, then you're going to get into trouble where you're the bottleneck for everything, and you're going to feel overwhelmed. And so yeah, I think that's kind of been a really, really important factor. I like to think of it as like an I, we, they. So, like, when you first start a project, you're the one doing everything. It's like your baby. And then we phase of it is like, you work with your team to come up with the systems and processes. And then the they portion is, you have someone else running the ship, and you kind of just observe and make sure that things aren't breaking apart. And so for Urban EDC, that's been accomplished. So we're kind of at that they phase where I don't have to be in it day to day. I'd say, like, yeah, 1 hour max per day.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for taking a minute here to listen to what I have to tell you about Gobundance membership. If you've been listening to this podcast and listening to me for any length of time, you know that Gobundance is the one catalyst to me changing my life drastically at the age of 40 plus. So for many of us out there, men and women, we struggle day to day being lone wolves in our own community, trying to figure out, how do we get unstuck? I can tell you so many conversations I had with people where they couldn't resonate with me and I couldn't resonate with them. And the moment I joined Gobundance, and I've made a lot of money as a member of Gobundance, but the return that I can't calculate is the ability to show up as my authentic self and celebrate my ambitions and my achievements, but also be vulnerable and clear about my losses and my screw-ups. Joining Gobundance has given me the ability to have all of that, to have the foundation on which I can build the kind of life I want to. It's how I quit my job. It's how I moved to the Dominican Republic. It's how I have the adventures I do right now. It's how I got this podcast. It's how I founded Gobundance Emerge. It's how I partner with Quantum Capital. All of it is thanks to my investment in me and finding this community of entrepreneurial people that are driven to be the best versions of themselves. As we call it, the tribe for healthy, wealthy, generous people who choose to live epic lives. If you're listening and haven't become a member, you're sitting on the sidelines and watching life pass you by when you have the chance to invest in yourself, in your community, in your tribe, and drive your life to the next level before, God, I'm 44. I mean, it went so fast. I've got so much I want to do, but time is compressing on me. This has shortened my time horizon to where I'm trying to get to, and it can for you as well. Check out GoBundance.com, fill out an application. If you want to go directly to the GoBundance Women's side, if you're $1 million+ in net worth and a female, go to GoBundanceWomen.com. And if you're at that $0 to $2 million mark for a man or $0 to $1 million mark for a woman, check out GobundanceEmerge.com. Sign up and hang out with me. I run that community like it's my life. I would love to have you a part of that. And we have we have given an amazing opportunity at $500 a month or $5,000 for the year to be part of a community that gets immense value from Gobundance members on a weekly basis through our millionaire case studies and everything else. Join one of these GoBundance communities, the one that's right for you. Get in the room that lets you look up at the next level so that you can achieve what you're trying to in this lifetime. Gobundance.com, GobundanceWomen.com, GobundanceEmerge.com. Check us out. At what point in the business's arc did you go into having the team and start to delegate responsibility? Like, was it early on? Was it, late in the game? Any regrets? Like, knowing what you know now, would you have done it sooner, later? Kind of give me an idea of, like, as a founder, at what point did you
Mhm.
end up bringing in a team and then start? I love the I, we, they. That's a great point. Start going through that process of, okay, let's do it together. And I'm going to start delegating. And was it the exact right time, or looking back, do you feel like it could have been done a little sooner or a little later than when you did it?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and there is no right or wrong timing for this. For example, I told you about our manager now, and he started off as a customer service rep. So, obviously back then he was not ready for this role,
Sure.
and it's a constant evaluation. So, I mean, I evaluate even today. Like, for example, like, you never know, like, next month there might be something where maybe he's no longer fit for the job, right? So I'm not saying like it's kind of a, there's always an evaluation, and I question myself too, like, am I the right person to be in this position? So I always evaluate every single position at the company, at that given moment in time, and evaluate whether or not that person is the right fit for where the company needs to be in the future. And so it's not, it's a, that's kind of a, it's an art, I'd say, more than a science. And so you can't really say, hey, in 1 year, I want to make sure you can do X, Y, and Z. Like, it doesn't work that way. It's always like, I mean, I guess you could create goals that way, but it's more of a gut feeling. Like, okay, this person is ready, or this person is not yet ready. What do they need to do in order to get ready? And so, yeah, I mean, it's not an easy
Yeah.
answer
No,
there.
it's
And I would, yeah, I would also add that I would say that it's usually better to have someone within the company to rise up into these larger roles versus trying to hire someone outside, to come in, unless they have like a ton of experience and everyone can rally around them and really, like, you know get their trust, earn their trust. But that's not easy to do, and I would say, if you can, just definitely, do it from within your company.
what have you learned about in the evaluation phase? What you needed and get from that manager. So is it specific market knowledge? Is it something more intangible, leadership skill or whatever? I'm sure it's a combination, but I'm kind of curious about the fit, in your opinion, your experience with what you
Yeah,
did and how you evaluated and determined, what, this guy's the guy. Was it that is he
yeah,
offsetting you personality wise? Is that what it is? Or is it that specific? Or is it more, no, 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 I've learned that I need somebody that has a lot of knowledge on product and I can develop the leadership, or the other way? What's that decision tree look like? How did you decide on this guy? What were the skills or the attributes that made you decide on him?
yeah. So I think there's core traits that you absolutely need. So, like, you have to be coachable. Like, for example, if we're working together and, this guy is kind of like giving me an attitude or doesn't want to change. I mean, that's a fundamental level of, like, okay, no, it's not going to work. So there's like certain levels of standards that you have to meet. And then beyond that, though, I would say the most important thing is probably, the vision of where the brand should be going. And so, remember, like, we want to delegate decision making and also the vision, right? So, uh, we really have to be on the same page. Like, literally, like, the decisions that they make or this manager makes on my behalf, it has to be like, we're so in sync that, like, he's thinking about what I'm thinking and I'm thinking about what he's thinking. And so that is probably the number one thing that I'm looking for, is how, I guess it's more of a gut intuition thing. He's been with us for 5+ years now, so he has a really good sense of how I like to operate, and things like that. Um, so that's probably the most important thing, I'd say. um, in terms of leadership, that's important as well. But that can be, that can be developed over time. but I think the vision and the intuition of where the brand needs to go is is more difficult to develop, or I guess kind of get. And so that's probably the most important factor.
Facebook at some point banned your ads because you're selling knives, which I mean,
Yes.
I roll. It's like that sounds so it's so binary. Like, oh, knife bad, no ad or whatever. But that sounds like Facebook. How did you or how had you maybe at that point? I don't know, maybe you already did diversify your your inputs, your marketing streams. If because I got to imagine Facebook
Mhm.
ad revenue, ad generated sales were a big piece of of your income. So what was the impact? I guess maybe that's part one of the question. What did you see when that happened? And then two, what have you or what did you or what are you doing to diversify your marketing strategies?
Yeah. So we were relying on these Facebook ads for our growth, for a good chunk of time. And to be honest, we were like, we were crushing all records, like sales records, and it was really effective. And then one day they just,
These are direct sales ads, correct? Like just to be clear, these are direct sales ads through Facebook.
yes, that's right.
Got it. Sorry, continue.
And so we saw about a 50% dip the following month. And
Wow.
at that moment, we're like, okay, well obviously we got to make some changes here. So the lesson that I learned there is that, in terms of growth channels, a lot of people like to say, double down on what's working, right? But that has a double edged sword because, okay, you double down on what's working, and then what if they ban you? Then what do you do, right? So, um, I mean, I see where that where that's coming from. Like, let's say Google search is doing really well for you, SEO. So you double down on that, but then the Google changes their algorithm, and then now you're screwed, right? So it's kind of like that. But for us, we started to look at, I guess, working with other makers and collaborators and partnering up with them and cross promoting. And so that's really been our biggest growth driver, is partnering up with other makers in the industry who already have really large followings. And we do projects together. And that way we kind of like share each other's audiences and we grow naturally from that. And so yeah, we doubled down on our product line to make sure that we're bringing in stuff that's really really hard to find, really high in demand stuff. And so instead of going like selling, you know, a lot of like one item where it's like we just ads and getting sales that way, we worked on a little more strategically. Okay, can we get 5 items of this thing that's like usually never available for sale? And so we do that, and then that people talk about it. Like, we have gear drops every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific time, where all the stuff gets uploaded to the site. And so at that time, people will go and like literally, we have customers setting alarm clocks
Hmm.
for that time to try to get some of these items. And so we've kind of trained our customers to like, hey, Wednesday 12 p.m. Pacific, you know where to go. And so that's worked out really well for
That's
us.
amazing. I love that. The space is so interesting. There's a guy in Gobundance. I won't say his name. He used to be an attorney, left to start an e-commerce business that it's golf cart parts. So I ask you about like the knives. Like I don't know how you've explained it really well. Actually, it's like it's not like you went in, oh, knives, cameras. Like you went through different products and it just somehow knives came up, right? The same for him, I'm sure, with golf cart parts. Um, but the potential in that space, like he's scaled to 10 million plus in revenue annually. And he credits a coach he has. It's actually another GoBundance guy, which is fascinating. Like golf cart parts, 10 million plus a year in golf cart parts. But what do you do next with that brand? Is this sellable? Can you wrap this up and sell it? Or do you, I don't know, what's the next step for your e-commerce brand for EDC?
Yeah, I mean, we could theoretically, um, because it's so like segregated out into different areas. So like, I have 3 parts to my business currently, but each part is very much contained. And so we could wrap it up and sell the brand to whoever else. So yeah, I mean, that's very much possible.
Interesting. All right. With this brand, you had no need to be, have a big following, be an influencer, none of that stuff, right? This was all you, some guy behind the scenes that starts a brand and boom, it blows up to 3.6 plus a year in revenue, which is incredible. Absolutely incredible. So
Mhm.
I love your story. But let's talk about Humphrey. It's a little bit of a different story to get to that brand. So who is Humphrey? And why does Humphrey have 180, 170, 150,000 followers? Let's start that story.
All right. So Humphrey is our French bulldog, and he is a celebrity on Instagram and TikTok now. Um, and so we brought him home in 2017, and we started just posting, cute videos and photos of him on Instagram. And some of them just took off, like they went viral. And it's so funny because the first real viral video that went off is me cradling him like a baby. And so like in the video you can see like my torso, and it's been viewed millions of times, right? And so he just gained a huge following. And then at that point, my wife and we thought, okay, how can we you know what can we do with this? And so the logical step here was that we already had the urban
Yeah.
EDC e-commerce shop, and people were already asking like, hey, where can I buy that harness? Where did you get that leash? And so we're like, okay, instead of driving traffic to like an Amazon affiliate page or something like that, we said, okay, let's just start an e-commerce shop because we already have the back end operations for, we know how to do it. And so we set up another Shopify site, and launched Spotted by Humphrey, which is a dog boutique. And so it's a play on word because his handle is Spotted Humphrey because he's got these like black spots, and he's got like so it's a play on words there. And yeah, it was a really crazy journey because we got invited to go down to LA and film with Shopify. And literally the week before that, like they were filming a commercial for Google. And then now we were like in the studio, and it was like my wife and Humphrey were on a set. It was like an actual professional set. And the camera crew, there were probably like 10 people. They're all filming, and it was insane. And it was just a really fun experience. And yeah, no,
And then you
it's
have
a
a
blast.
POTA. Is that the second one now? Second French bulldog. What is POTA
Yeah, yeah,
involved, or is
yeah.
POTA like the
So
redheaded stepchild, like not the star, like Ryan's World's little siblings kind of thing? Like how does POTA fit in?
Yeah, she does model for some clothing. But yeah, she's a little less involved, I'd say, in the shop. But I mean, she's really really popular on social, like on Instagram and TikTok, like because she's so animated and her personality is so big that a lot of her videos actually do better now than Humphrey's videos. And so I mean, she helps out with the marketing side of things, I guess you could call it that. But yeah, I mean, just having them two just interact with each other, I mean, that stuff is like, those are the videos
That's
that do
cool.
really really well.
That's cool.
So
What, if you don't
yeah.
mind me asking, is that taken off? Is that brand taken off? Is it done well? Is it growing, or is it just sort of, I don't know, something fun? It
Yeah.
brings in a little money, and it's just it's in the
Yeah.
back end. You already have the back end, so no big deal. What does that look like?
Well, yeah, it is growing. And so Sandy, my wife and business partner, she launched her own product last year, called Poopsie Daisy. And it's like this thing you put on your leash, and you carry, you can put the used poo bags on there to carry around with you. And so that she did a Kickstarter for that. It was successful. And so that's her first product that she
Yeah.
made herself. And so Spotted by Humphrey was similar concept to Urban ADC, where we were reaching out to other brands to bring stuff in as like
Yeah.
a boutique, right? But now she's starting to build her own products. And so she's got some other products that she has kind of in the back of her mind that we're going to develop. So yeah, it's a brand that's it's a lot of fun, to be honest. Like it's just a fun thing. And also like it's the new brand with all these new products that were coming. I think that's kind of like going to be a big I guess
Yeah.
inflection point for us. But also she's got other you know revenue streams from the sponsorships that we get from brands. I mean, so it's a really interesting model because essentially like our French bulldog is like a creator, right? So we get like brand deals from for posting and reels and all that stuff. So the revenue mix is definitely different. It's not like 100% e-commerce, but it's definitely like a growing, I guess, subset of our entire business.
I look at you. You've got like 400 followers on Instagram yourself, right? Like, like if it's your account, unless I'm looking at the wrong account,
Right.
but it's
Yeah.
like 400 followers. Your dog has
Yeah.
150,000 plus a big TikTok account, all that stuff, right? So you've got these two different brands, these two different businesses running. One of which is non-reliant on any sort of influencer marketing. The other one is fully reliant on influencer marketing, and obviously, dog lifespan and everything. I don't mean that, but sustainability. sustainability on each of these sides. I guess what have you learned? It is one preferred, and this could be personal preference, doesn't have to be business preference, or is there one you recommend more than the other? I want to dive into these two different because there's so many people that say, "Man, I want to build my brand," and that's great. You have a bunch of followers, but then you got to learn how to monetize that brand and so on. But then on the other side, you built a significant brand and business without any sort of following or influencer marketing. So, can you talk about those parallels? What have you learned? What do you teach people? Is it a preference thing? What does that look like?
Yeah. So when I was building Urban EDC, I really wanted to build up a brand. And to be honest, like we also built a brand for Urban EDC, an audience. So we didn't launch Urban EDC until we hit about 10,000 followers on Instagram. And so we were able to build an Instagram page for Urban
Oh,
EDC
got it.
before we launched. And so I do always urge people to build an audience for the community that you're serving first. Um, but I mean, I knew from day one that Urban EDC was not going to be like my own personal thing, and so I didn't build a personal brand, based off of that. But then with Spider Humphrey, obviously, like it was like his videos and such were doing so well, so we wanted to leverage that and kind of double down on that, and so that's kind of the reason why that was way more like focused on that angle versus urban edc, which was more like the company angle, right? So personal brand versus company brand. And to be honest, I feel like back in 2015 when urban edc launched, the trend and the consumer psyche wasn't like, there were not a lot of brands doing cool stuff. And so if you were a brand doing relatively comparatively cool stuff, then you can still stand out and people can still get behind a brand. Whereas now I feel like that has kind of changed where people
Right.
don't trust brands, they trust
People. Yeah.
these creators. And so now I would say, definitely build a personal brand first and then start companies after that. And so the approach is different because the consumer mindset has shifted a little away from companies into personal brands.
Is there a
So
secret, a hack, something that you've done to grow a following on both sides, even the 10,000? I mean, was it well timed when you were doing it?
yeah,
Did you, like you said, you got one viral video, you just kind of like, whoop, lucky, and then boom, you grew. But I don't know. How
yeah,
do you like, I completely, by the way, agree with that. Building your brand. And I want to talk about monetizing that brand because that's a whole other art. But building the brand or building the size or building the following, building a community, like you said, I love that phrasing, a social network.
hmm
What are some things you've done or that you teach or that you know of or that you've seen that help people? Somebody's sitting like, well, I've got a decent following. People are pretty engaged, but I want to grow my following or grow my reach. What are some things people that you do or have done or that you've seen done?
yes. So I think you need to be aware of what your community is looking for. And so when I say that, what I mean by that is for example, for Urban EDC, when we launched in 2015, for about 6 months before that, we were posting daily on our Instagram. And the things that we're posting aren't our products because we didn't launch it yet. So what we were posting were just reposts of other people that took really high quality photos of EDC gear, everyday carry gear. And so we would give them credit. And then what we also did was we laid out the different brands that are in that photo. And so a lot of times, the problem that a lot of people were having within this community at the time was people will be posting really cool stuff, but then they wouldn't know where to buy it. They'll be like, "Where can I get that?" Like that's like probably the number one thing that the people ask is, "Who's the maker?" or "Where can I get that?" And so what we did was we did some research, and essentially every single post had you know pen and then tag the maker, flashlight and then tag the maker. So we essentially identified all the items, and then in that photo we tagged the original poster. And so that person would check it out, be like, "Oh, cool! Like this is a good post," and they'll either follow us or they'll comment on it or whatever. But we did this for 6 months, and so what happens is even just that slight small value exchange of people wanting to know like where these things were from because people weren't talking about it, even just that tiny piece of information was enough to get people to follow us and build this brand, I guess, right? And so um I think it really depends. Like for example, for Humphrey's account, that was completely different. That's not what we did for Humphrey's account. But what we did was like we just created really great content during a time when Instagram video was starting to take off. And so Reels was like a new product. And when Reels came out, we kind of rode that wave. And a lot of the Reels like got millions of views. And so I think it's really about knowing. So there's a couple parts to this question. It's knowing the deep problems for your community that you're trying to solve, and then the second thing is writing out, I guess, like a wave or a trend that's happening, um, maybe on a platform level. So, Instagram is pushing out reels at the time, videos. And so we posted a lot of videos and reels. I'd say maybe right now, like TikTok. TikTok is pushing more longer form content. They're trying to get, less of the 4 or 5 second videos and more 1 minute plus videos. So my guess is they'll probably push that to their algorithm and they'll show more of those videos because they want to push that and promote that. And so you kind of have to know, what is being pushed by the platforms, and then how can you kind of ride that wave. And so it's a two-part thing where you have to figure out what your audience wants and why they're following you. So Urban EDC's case, they were following it because we were posting really cool photos and identifying where to buy all those things. And then Spotted Humphrey's case is, we were making really cute and funny videos, and then posting it in, uh, kind of riding the wave of these platforms. And so there's a couple parts to that. Yeah.
The thing you talked about just now is understanding what your community wants and delivering that to them. You did that through, I guess it sounds like almost analytics more than engagement. Is that fair? Or was there a robust engagement campaign as well? Whatever that means, DMs, some sort of outreach, socially interacting with your audience. Like, how did your audience got what they wanted based on the data you saw? If I'm hearing it right, is that the way? I mean, that's obviously, I've never heard that. I've always heard, no, you've got to engage, comment on every comment, DM everybody, put out stories with interactive, polls or quizzes or whatever. And I'm sure all of that's there. But for you, is it more understanding based on the analytics what your audience is looking at and delivering more of that? Was that the way you've grown affinity with your brand?
The engagement piece is really important now, I would say. Like, it's the world has changed. When Urban EDC first launched, like, you didn't need to do that much engagement. I mean, yes, sure, you can engage, but like, it wasn't that, like, there weren't as many brands, there weren't as many creators or influencers, and so it was easier to get by
Sure.
just posting really good content. But now I would say you definitely do need to engage, and so, um, with Spotted Humphrey, like, you have Humphrey fans out there who are commenting every single day. I'm serious. Like, it's crazy, but we walk around the neighborhood and people recognize him. They want to take
That's
photos with him
awesome.
and stuff. It's
Yeah.
hilarious. Uh, and so, they're commenting every day, and we want to make sure we go in there and we, at least give them a heart or whatever, and just make sure that they feel appreciated, because they don't have to do that, right? And so, it's definitely changed now, and I would definitely say engagement is important. Now, obviously, engagement takes a long time to do, and so you got to weigh the options of, like, okay, like, do I engage for an hour, or do I take that
Mm.
hour and use it for something else that's like that could grow the business even further? And so that's really up to you to decide. But I would say engagement is pretty important now.
Well, the phases you talked about is really good too. As I think about my brand or what I've been trying to do with my brand or have done with my brand, I feel like when there's the most momentum is when I'm doing what you did with EDC for 6 months, right? It's just give, give, give. Here's a bunch of, this is what you're looking for, or whatever. There's no ask, right?
Hmm.
There's no, and you're growing an audience. People are interested in what you're saying or whatever, and people like that. They like to, especially now in the day, like you said, of personal brands trumping the business brand, which man, that resonates so much with me. I completely agree with that. People want to hear from authentic voices and almost like, okay, you just walked in the door. Are you going to sell me? No. Oh, okay. You're giving me a bunch of information. I like this guy. And then later on, if you say, hey, by the way, I got this thing I'm launching. It's the jab, jab, right hook approach, right? Like people are going to buy because now they trust you, they like you, and all of that stuff. And
Hmm.
even
Hmm.
somebody I had on the show was saying, oh, we do a 95-5 post ratio. It's 95% pure value, 5% we ask. We make a sale, we direct them somewhere or whatever it might be. And that just really makes sense to me. But I think the era of the personal brand is honestly in its infancy, and I think it's a very, very powerful, underutilized, inexpensive, if not free way to build audience. And audience is a hell of an asset class, I think.
Yeah, this is great. So I actually have a framework that I just
Ooh.
I just wrote about, and it's called M.A.P.S. So M.A.P.S. And so this is really cool because it goes along with the podcast First Class Founders. So I have this airplane theme going on, and so when I came up with this acronym M.A.P.S, it was like I was like pretty happy with that. But it's it stands for mindset, audience,
Mm,
product, and scale. So what I mean by that is mindset is first of all, you got to be ready. This is kind of I see entrepreneurship as like a long game. Like it's more of a life approach than seeing an end game for me personally. So you got to know where what you're getting yourself into. You got to shed your old identity. You got to just really figure out like what is it that I want in my life. Like that's kind of the whole like visualization, this kind of thing, right? So that's the mindset piece. Audience piece is build an audience, right? Like you just said, give value, build an audience because it's going to
yeah,
be really valuable later on. But you're not trying to sell them anything. The audience piece comes before that, or before the product. And so you build your audience. And what's important here is that you want to build an audience that not only um, you have expertise in, because then it's easier to build an audience. Like for example, I have a lot of experience in e-commerce, so I could talk about e-commerce and people will follow me. But then I'm also interested in this creator space now, and so I'm not only talking about the e-commerce stuff. That would be way easier for me to build an audience, but I want to bring in the creator world as well. And so I think there's two pieces to the audience building, which is like the people that the expertise that you have, because that'll make it easier to build an audience. But then there's also like the piece of like where you want to be and who you want to be hanging out with. And so you may not have an expertise in that, but that's where the networking piece comes in, and that's where like these mastermind groups like Gobundance can come in, because that's kind of like where you want to be in the future. And so you want to kind of do both of those to build your audience. And then the third part is product. And so once you have an audience, then you can figure out what the problems they have, how you can help them. And it really comes from a place of like serving them rather than like, I'm going to build a product and people are going to buy it from me. Like, that's not how it works. You got to go from how can I help these people accomplish something or solve a problem, right? And so that's kind of the product piece. And so like testing, validation, doing pre-sales, all that stuff. That's P. And then scaling is once you have that, you don't want to scale before you have product market fit, because then you're throwing money into a leaky bucket. And so once you kind of nail down that product market with the product, then you can move on to the next phase, which is scaling. And this is where all the operational stuff comes into play. So setting up the systems and the whole like I, we, they thing comes into play with the scaling portion of it. So this entire framework, one, it builds on the other, previous letter. So you can't have scaling without product. You can't have product without audience. You can't have audience without really knowing what you're getting yourself into with the mindset. So that's kind of the whole thing that I see.
I like that. I
Yeah.
could see the lead magnet. It's a great lead magnet you can put together on that. So I'm serious. That's a great. I love the name. I love the stacking. That's really really cool. So kudos to you on that. Let's pivot over real quick. I want to talk about GrowthJet, climate neutral logistics company. What does that mean?
So we offset all of our carbon footprint for the
Mm,
entire year. And so you can think of it as like for 2020, 2021, 2022, we produced zero carbon for our operations. And so that has really been interesting for us because, a lot of brands are now value focused instead of just, hey, we sell you this product, go ahead and buy it. There's got to be a why behind it. Like, oh, we exist because we want to solve, like we're a sustainable company because there's a lot of issues with trash or whatever. Like it's bad for the planet, and so because now there's like this big push for um, brands having a voice and brands having standing up for something. Us being climate neutral certified, which we're the first 3PL to become climate neutral certified, by the way. And so when we did that, we got a lot of interest from brands who also think the same way. And so it's really about value alignment. And so we don't want to work with brands who are just looking to get the cheapest pricing, cheapest rates, or whatever. Like, obviously, we want to provide, the best service at the best prices, but we really want to work with people that align with our values. And so, because of having this climate neutral aspect of it, like we've been able to do that where, we're attracting a lot of partners that we want to work with instead of like just taking in everybody and then like them, deciding later on, like, oh, this company is like, horrible for whatever reason. Like we can actually like work with them in an amicable way.
Are there tax incentives inherent in that as well, being certified as climate neutral? I'm surprised by that. Yeah,
No,
that's interesting. I mean, I
no
think
tax
what I love
incentives
about
here.
it is it's
Yeah,
purely capitalist what you're
yeah.
doing, right? I mean, it's market based, so you're doing something that you believe in around the climate, which gets so much attention, and it's such a football. It's
Hmm.
politicized somehow. Climate is politicized, but whatever. But you've created a business that's been certified as climate neutral. It's important to you, obviously, and you've got brands getting on board that share that value. So you don't
Hmm.
need massive subsidies or tax breaks or whatever to have a thriving business in the space that is helpful to the climate. That's what I take from it anyway, which is really, really cool. So that's amazing. How is it? And maybe you said it. I might, how sometimes when you're on an interview, your brain is going other places. But how is it that it is like? Can you get tactical? Like, what does it mean to be like? How is it climate neutral? What does that mean? Climate neutral. What do you do?
So there is an organization, and this is a fairly new organization, but they're really legit. Like, they've got REI certified through them. They've got all these big companies now certifying through them. And so it's an organization that's essentially you have to measure your carbon footprint. And so they help you like determine, okay, how much money did you spend on X, Y, and Z? And so they look at all that and then they determine, okay, you have to offset, this amount of, um, carbon footprint for the year. And so once you have that amount, then you can go to their marketplace and they partner up with a bunch of different services that, you can buy credits, right? So you go to that marketplace and you essentially buy whatever carbon you need to buy to offset your annual
Hmm.
carbon. So that's kind of how that works. And so once you do that, then they will certify you as carbon climate neutral certified, and they'll put you on the website and all that stuff. And so this, in my opinion, is the most legitimate organization that doesn't have like a bias, because there are some out there that are like there's like a carbon neutral certification, but it's like through some kind of fund where like they're trying to get people. It's like there's like a lot of politics, like you said, involved. But this organization is a nonprofit, and they're really like positioned well, in my opinion, from a non-biased perspective to grow. And so yeah, that's kind of like why we kind of went with them, and they're very strict. They're actually more the stricter one. So there's a lot of other services that will just say, "Oh, you're carbon neutral. Your business is carbon neutral," but like there's not a lot of like checks and balances in place. Whereas this company, they actually like you got to like measure all your stuff, and so it's a lot more comprehensive, and that's why I think that they'll do really well in the future.
Is there a what I don't know what's the additional cost to you to do this? So as a percentage of revenue, as a percentage of your bottom
Yeah,
line expense line, whatever it might be. But what is the additional cost to you? How significant is that?
it's not that significant. So it's about $1,000 to use their, I guess their brand image, their branding. So climate neutral
One time
certification
or monthly or
per year. Yeah. And then we have to buy the carbon offsets. So that's obviously depending on your business and all that stuff. Um, but yeah, it's the licensing piece to use for the year, and then there's the carbon offsets that you have to purchase yourself. And so it's those two pieces combined. That
so all in for the year? This is a fairly new company, but still all in for the year. Are you anticipating, or is it 10 grand, 20 grand less?
No, no, it's less than that. I think all in is 2.5K or so. So it's not much.
Wow. Are you advantaged? Are you in a the type of business that doesn't put off a lot of carbon to begin with? Meaning this 3PL, is it like, yeah, we don't have a huge carbon footprint to begin with, so it's why not? We can absolutely afford to offset our carbon. Is that an advantage, or is it like, no, actually it's pretty affordable no matter who you are?
I think that it depends on the service. So, for example, we are. I mean, the majority of what we're doing is service based, right? So we have a staff that picks and packs your orders, and we ship them out, right? And so it's based off of what the expenses and what's under our I guess umbrella of the business. And so for us, it's not that much carbon footprint, like you mentioned. And so I think that if you have, for example, if like FedEx or like UPS wants to go through with this, I mean, their cost is going to be way higher because of all the vehicles that they own. And they have to offset all of that carbon footprint from those vehicles. And so because we don't own any vehicles, it is more manageable for us to offset that. But I mean, there's other businesses that are just, it's like a studio, and all they have is like electricity that they have to offset, like, right. So it really depends on like, what type of business that you're running. But I would say things that are a little bit more I don't know, things that are a little more, I guess, movement in terms of like maybe commuting or transportation. These, it tends to be much higher. So,
Okay. On the topic of entrepreneurship, as we're going to wind down here in a second, but I'm curious about this from your perspective, because you went through,
mhm.
different sort of iterations in your career, job, and then it's like, well, you're working in startups, so it's kind of an entrepreneurial feel to it, and then full on entrepreneur. You've grown, collectively an 8-figure business between your brands.
Yeah,
Are entrepreneurs born, or can they be bred?
I love this question. So, I spent a lot of time thinking about this. So, I
Hmm.
think that it's both. And what's great about entrepreneurship is that even if you don't have the inherent skill set. So actually, this analogy is what the analogy I like to use is like LeBron James basketball, right? So obviously, when LeBron James is born, he had talent that I don't have, like a normal person doesn't have. But like if he does nothing with them and he just sits around and does nothing, I mean, then it's nothing. Then it amounts to nothing, right? Um, but of course, he's got a crazy work ethic on top of that now, and so he's able to essentially be the best in the world at this one sport. And so the difference between a professional basketball player and entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur is this. So let's say you're pretty good at basketball, but you're not able to make the professional league, right? You can't make a living just playing amateur basketball and be happy with that, basically. I mean, but as an entrepreneur, even if you're not Elon Musk or these Jeff Bezos, like even if you're not the LeBron James of the business world, I mean, you can make a pretty good living, right? And so that's really the difference that I saw in these kind of like this analogy here is in order to make a decent living in a professional sport like basketball, you have to be like top 0.0001% of that. Whereas entrepreneurship, you don't have to be the absolute best, but you can make a life that you want to live as long as you keep at it and you keep learning and you keep iterating. I mean, that's really the biggest difference I see. Honestly,
Okay.
I feel like every single person can be an entrepreneur. It's just a matter of like, how far you're willing to take it. And yeah, of course, there's like talents or like born skill sets. Like I'd say like patience, the ability to maybe like delay gratification, like things like that, maybe, or maybe being able to like handle difficult situations and like just get over them easily. Like maybe these things are kind of more of the inherent, like you're born with. But generally, I do believe that everybody can become an entrepreneur and be relatively successful at it, which is and make a really good living. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship is, it doesn't take that much to get to that point. Whereas something like a professional sports, like you have to be the absolute best to make a living off of it, right? So,
That's a great answer, man. I love that. That's a really good answer. I've always wondered that myself. And I think I've had to answer that question for me based out of insecurity. Like, am I really? Can I really, like
mhm.
I see you mentioned, not even Elon Musk, but a lot of guys in Gobundance, like, no, those are the real entrepreneurs. I'm just playing and, I haven't run out yet. So, the idea is, can I be? And, I've come around a long way. I anchor it in, is there any trait of the entrepreneurs I see that I share? And for me, it's defiance. That's the one word. My last guest, we talked about that. That word defiance is huge. And I think that most entrepreneurs I know are that, not like, screw you, but more, wait, but that could be done better. I know I can do it better. Kind of this or inner defiance that they have in them. So,
Hmm.
um, let's talk about First Class Founders, the podcast. Really, really good,
Yeah.
well produced, growing. I know. Talk about it. What do you intend to do with it? What is the what are you trying to put out into the world?
Yeah. So I feel like I've had some crazy life stories and lessons that I've learned growing my businesses. And it's really a platform for me to share those lessons and also encourage people and entrepreneurs to start on their journey, because I really believe that you learn so much by being an entrepreneur. You learn a lot of life lessons. And so I think that every single person can benefit from starting their own business. And so I really want First Class Founders to be a destination for entrepreneurs to come together and essentially learn. And it doesn't even have to be from me. At some point, right now, like going back to that I, we, they framework, you know, I'm at the I stage of First Class Founders. And so eventually, I think that, I'll hire a team and all that. And I'm hoping that it'll become a platform for people to go to and essentially learn more about, like, okay, how do I, going back to that M.A.P.S framework, how do I build an audience? How do I build my first product? How do I scale this thing? Like basically a place where people can learn all that, in an area that's like very, accessible and, hopefully, like, yeah, I mean, it's just basically my way of giving back, to, the entrepreneurial community, and hopefully people will join me along the way, and we'll see.
I
So
love it, man. Love it all. I appreciate this. This is really, really fascinating, really interesting to hear your story. It's inspiring as hell. Where can people reach out, learn more about website, Instagram account, whatever you want to drop?
yeah, so yeah, the podcast is at firstclassfounders.com. And so that's really, a great place to start. And then I'm also on Twitter at, Yong Soo Chung. It's YONGSOOCHUNG. And so Twitter is primarily the channel that I'm on now. And so if you want to send me a DM, go ahead. I'm open to talking to anybody. And so, yeah, that's kind of, where you can find me.
Good stuff, man. Appreciate it. And yeah, can't wait to put this out into the world. So thanks for coming on.